So yes, it will record it. If that's okay. And then let me share slides just so everyone knows kind of the format of what's going to happen today. So let me move this. Cool. Everyone can see this. I know there's things like blocking, but yeah, I'll be MC today, and the topic for today is missions. And just the introduction, the roundtable talk is just a time where we invite speakers to discuss the topic from a biblical perspective. So if you were here the last 2 times, we invited some seminary students, we invited some pastors, and we just asked them, yeah, like what was their journey like to seminary and how God led them through that journey and how they were blessed. Yeah, so for today's topic, we'll be talking about missions. And yeah, I have 2 guest speakers, 2 brothers that I had the privilege of knowing during my college years. So we have brother Conrad Shiao and brother Michael Wong, who I'll let them introduce themselves later after this. So for the overview, we'll start with speaker introductions, and then we'll have around maybe 45 to 50 minutes of discussion where each speaker will talk. I'll just ask them a few questions about missions, and then they'll respond, and then they have their own personal Q&A session where you can ask questions to them from the audience afterwards. And then after they're both finished talking, there's a general Q&A where either of them can answer any questions that you may have about missions or about anything that they shared. So for the discussion, some topics or themes we'll be going through is like the biblical foundation for missions, short versus long-term missions, what do you do on missions, their personal testimonies, how God led them to missions or on the mission field, how they experience a lot of blessings or experience God, and then some practical questions like how to start thinking about missions or how we can support missions in general. And then for the Q&A sessions, to tell me your questions, you can either message publicly on Zoom in the chat. You can also message me privately on Zoom, or if you want to anonymously answer or ask questions, you can just go through a Google form, tinyurl.com/CCCF roundtable. And if you want to tell us what topics you want to hear in the future, you can go to tinyurl.com roundtable topic. So without further ado, let me just post this link in the chat for everyone to know how to ask questions. And then we'll start off with some speaker introductions. So Conrad, can I have you just introduce yourself for us?
Hi everyone, my name is Conrad Shiao. I'm currently in Mongolia, the country of Mongolia, in the capital city, Ulaanbaatar. So as Nathan was saying, we were a part of the same kind of church campus ministry in the past. I actually didn't have the chance to get to know Nathan that well, unfortunately. I was mostly overseas. But I guess my main thoughts of him, other than being a godly guy, is that he's insanely smart. And so when we play board games together, like Puerto Rico, or I'm doing fantasy basketball for the first time ever, I'm really afraid of him. So he's the target. So anyways, but I'm very thankful to be able to be here with you guys. Just a little background for myself. I'm a Bruin, so I graduated from UCLA back in 2005. I double majored in ecology and history. They're not related. I just really enjoyed both. Also, very not Asian majors. I was pre-med, but that changed. And I'm almost done with my 10-year program at Talbot Theological Seminary. So I was joking with Mike and some others back in 2012, like, oh, I'm on the 10-year plan. I'm going to do like 1 class a semester, mostly overseas. And it's 2021. So 10 years later, and I'll graduate in 2023. So I'm almost there. And as I said, I'm here in Mongolia. I'm here with my wife. I have 2 kids, 1 4-year-old son and 1 newborn who's 5 months old. Both were born here in Mongolia. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably talk about it a little bit more later, but mostly doing church planting, evangelism, discipleship kind of ministry here in Mongolia. And yeah, some of my hobbies, interests. I like guitar, kind of, but I have to lead praise at least twice or three times a week, every week. So it's almost like a job. I like hiking. I love nature. I also love scuba diving. That was part of my, I had to do a study abroad in Australia. So I got scuba certified. But being in Mongolia, landlocked, I don't get much chance, but I hope to do it soon again. Yeah, well, good to meet all of you guys, even though it's online.
Nice. Thanks, Conrad. It's good to have you. It's always fun playing board games with him too. So yeah, next, yeah, Mike, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name is Mike, and I know Nathan the same way, but I was not overseas. I was serving at UC Irvine while he was at USC. So we got to know each other. On the weekends, we would do activities together and church um, across the campuses. So I actually married. I have a 2-year-old son, Joshua, and then a baby on the way, a baby girl. So eagerly awaiting to meet her face to face in March. Yeah, kind of like same as Conrad. I'm doing a very slow track seminary at Talbot. I actually started in 2009, so I'm on like the 15-year plan. I'll probably graduate in 3 or 4 years. But yeah, just take one class at a time to get more equipped from the professors. And yeah, ministry. I'm currently a staff campus minister for Asian American Christian Fellowship at UC Irvine. So I actually had 1 year with Josiah as he was a senior, but it was all on Zoom. So I actually only saw Josiah once in person. All the ministry on Zoom last year. And then, yeah, my hobbies and interests. I love sports and games, so definitely playing with Nathan a lot of games. Same sentiment as Conrad. And I like watching. I would play more sports too, but yeah, just not as much time nowadays. But definitely hope to train my son to play in the future. And that's me.
Nice. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I see a theme here: board games and fantasy basketball, and they're both beating me. So I don't know what they're saying. But yeah, let's move on to the discussion time, so we can just glean from their experiences and their wisdom. So first, yeah, we're gonna have Mike speak, and I guess the first and foremost, I think it's important to talk about is what are missions and what is the biblical foundation for missions?
All right. Well, thanks, Nathan. So first of all, what is missions? It's actually not a biblical word, and Christians use it anyway. So I think there's a couple definitions. One is people think of missions as just being missional in general. So like every Christian should be missional wherever we are. We're trying to bring the gospel to the world all around us. But I think specifically what we're talking about tonight is bringing the gospel cross-culturally to other nations and other people groups. And so I just want to briefly share 4 verses, the biblical foundation of missions. And the first 2 are actually some of Jesus's last words to his disciples before he ascended to heaven, after the resurrection and before he ascends. The first one is probably really familiar, the Great Commission in Matthew 28:18-20. Jesus said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." So as he discipled them, he wants them to go disciple, but the direct object of that verb is actually the nations. And so Matthew starts off with, Abraham in Matthew chapter 1, and then he ends with all the nations. Yeah, another verse that he says to his disciples just before he leaves is Acts 1:8. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And this is actually at the beginning of the book of Acts. This is kind of an outline of the rest of the book. So the ministry starts in Jerusalem and then branches out to Judea and Samaria. And then on the later parts of Acts, the apostles are going around to the ends of the earth. So we're also definitely called to witness to who Jesus is to the ends of the earth. And then the last two verses, one I wanted to go more to the beginning when it started, and then the last one will be at the end, when it will end. So the beginning of missions is actually in Genesis chapter 12, but why wasn't it earlier? Because there wasn't nations earlier. There was only different nations starting at the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. So after that, they were like the people were scattered to different languages and nations. And so God appears to Abram and he says this, the Lord had said to Abram, this is from Genesis 12, 1-3, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And so just as Matthew starts with, Jesus as the son of Abraham, Paul says the gospel that God gave to Abraham was that you will be a blessing to all the nations. And so that's what he says here, that every nation on earth could be blessed through Abraham and Abraham's descendants. And then the last verse is a glimpse of heaven in Revelation chapter 5, verse 9. And this says, and they sang a new song saying, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain. And with your blood, you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. And so I just share this because in the end, when we're, all of the church is in heaven, worshiping Jesus, it's like Jesus is the one who was slain. And what was that for? To purchase for God people from every tribe, language, people, and nation. So not just, certain kinds of people, but there will be people in heaven from every nation. And that's kind of, the goal of missions is we hope to see people like in Mongolia where Conrad is, or in China or wherever else that people might end up going, that from every nation we can see them in heaven.
Cool. I think you brought up some really good points, and I definitely didn't even know missions was not even in the Bible, but I think, like you shared, you can see how the theme of missions, like God's heart for the nations, is throughout the whole Bible, from Genesis to Matthew to Revelations. And I think, that's why I chose that topic today, so that we can just learn more about the importance of missions and how we can, we as a church can really grow in that. So Mike has gone on many short-term mission trips before. So I think the questions I kind of tailored more towards that side of missions. So one of the questions I had was, what is the purpose of specifically short-term missions and why are they needed?
Yeah, so they're definitely needed. Obviously it's to bring the gospel of Christ across culture, across language barriers, to other people who don't know Jesus. Specifically, a few reasons that I thought of. First, that for the mission field itself, short-termers who go for a few weeks or a couple months, they bring a new faith, a kind of fresh faith and excitement to the mission field. And you could probably ask more to Conrad, who lives out there, but when the short-termers come, there's like an extra excitement and faith that they bring that God is going to do something while we're here. And they also bring we've experienced a lot of recruiting power to the mission field. So what we've done in the past, working with Conrad and working with Nathan, that we've taught English, and when a group of short-termers goes, they're able to recruit a lot more students and they're able to share. And then after that, we have the long-term missionaries like Conrad following up with them and discipling them, whether they are still seeking and hope maybe be a believer, or they actually do believe while the short-termers are there, and the long-termers can follow up. So that's one reason. Also, another reason, actually more for the people who go, a lot of the long-termers, such as Conrad and others, they start their mission experience with short-term. So yeah, a lot of the people who end up making this their vocation and going overseas for longer time, decades, or even the rest of their lives, start with short-term missions experience first. So it's really great to get that experience and to see what God will do. And if that might be a calling that God would have for you, it's a really great opportunity to go for a short-term first. And then also for the people who go, it's definitely a great way to gain heart for missions and whatever role God calls you to. So all Christians, we're supposed to be involved with missions in some ways. Whether it's in prayer and supporting and giving, maybe emotional and logistical, practical support for missionaries, or even occasionally or permanently going yourself. So there's a lot of different roles within the missions enterprise that the church needs. And so as you go, you can, God helps grow your heart for the mission enterprise, the mission field, and you might be able to find ways that God's calling you to serve in that area.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think those are really, good reasons to like the purpose of short-term missions. And I know, like personally, I was blessed every time I went, and I think it's important for all of us to really, develop that world vision and like to really experience like what is God doing in the nations. So easy for us to hear like, oh yeah, like China, Middle East, like there's missionaries going there doing ministry, but it's really hard to really experience or really know what's going on unless you go there and see for yourself and really experience it and really grow a heart for it. So yeah, Mike, you've been on a lot of different short-term mission trips. So I wanted to ask, like, what kind of short-term mission trips did you go on, and how were you blessed by them?
Yeah, so I've been on about 15 trips when I was in high school, I first started with my church to Mexico. I'm from San Diego, so it's like actually pretty close. And then starting in college and into my 20s and early 30s, I went to India, China, and Taiwan, Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, Turkey, and Malaysia. And so these were awesome experiences, life-changing, all of them. But I think kind of the summary of what God did in me was God formed me to be a world Christian. So, before I go, it's like, I'm just here in Southern California and I'm just, in this world, in this culture, in this language, and that's really all I think about. But I think being able to go to all these different and diverse cultures and meet so many different people helped me to be a world Christian. So one of the great blessings was actually being able to worship, study the word, prayer, and share the gospel with Christians in those cultures. So everywhere I went, I would meet, local believers and be able to just like, we don't even know each other or each other's culture that well, but we are one in Christ. And then, I also had kind of some desperate situations. I may tell some stories later if we have time, but even in those situations, like God is with me. So he showed me when this or that happens and crazy things happen on the field, God is with me. So I don't have anything to fear. And those lessons are like really important for me continuing on. And then, last thing is he showed me his glory and the power of the gospel to save people despite language and cultural barriers. So I would share with people and it's like, I don't know if they totally understand, or like there's still that barrier between us, but wow, like God does amazing things and he does miracles in people in these other countries that I've been to. And you just see people change. You see people even cry and weep over the gospel, over God's love for them that they didn't know before we told them. So it's such a great experience to see God changing someone right before your eyes and seeing them like, receive him and start a relationship with him.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's kind of yeah, I know too, like how much you can be blessed to short-term missions, despite a lot of the difficulties and hardships, like cultural language barrier. I remember just trying to share the gospel over Google Translate to one person, and yeah, I was like, I hope Google's doing their job right, to translating this properly. But he said he was able to accept Christ because you can see how God was like reaching out to this individual because his grandma was a Christian, which is very rare in Central Asia. And I'm sure, yeah, I know Mike does have a lot of crazy stories, so maybe we can hear more of those later. But I guess, yeah, maybe you can hear one of these experiences because my next question is, yeah, what is one of the biggest challenges of missions and how did God help you through that?
All right, so I'll try to keep it short, but I thought of two interesting ones. So first one, I got arrested in China for sharing the gospel. And I was by myself, so I was taken to a police station and everything. But the crazier thing is like, so I'm Chinese, but I don't speak Chinese, and I didn't have a phone. This is back in 2005, so I mean, we had phones, but they weren't like today. I didn't have any Chinese money because I was with the team and they carried all the money, so I didn't have any money. I didn't have contact info of my friends, so I didn't have anything. But to make a long story short, like God helped me get out because they realized I'm like not a big threat. I'm just one person, and then they called a taxi for me. And I somehow communicated through pictures and like sign language that I didn't have any money. So they told the taxi driver, my friends, when they pick me up, will like bring money. The only thing I had was a walkie-talkie. And so when we got to this, I only remember the destination because the university we lived next to was Linda, and one of our teammates' names was Linda. So that's the only way I remembered. And I got out, I walkie-talkied the area, and one of the girls heard me and brought the money. So that was like God's salvation to get out of that mess. And then the other kind of crazy story was getting stuck at the border between Kazakhstan and China. So we were going from Kyrgyzstan to China and we passed through Kazakhstan, but because of a clerical error, the dates were wrong on the visas. And so they wouldn't let us leave Kazakhstan until the next day. And so they dropped us off in the middle of the cornfield, and we're just like right between the border. And we didn't have any, because we weren't supposed to be there. We didn't have any Kazakh money. Nobody on our team spoke Russian or Kazakh, and we had no place to live until the next day. But what happened was one of our teammates spoke Chinese, and so we found a taxi driver that spoke Chinese and was willing to take Chinese money, which we did have. And he drove us to a nearby motel that was willing to take American USD, American dollars. And then he picked us up the next day to take us back to the border to get across. So again, it's like, these are just examples of desperate situations that you couldn't have anticipated, but that God just steps in and like saves you, and he's with you. And so I always live with those experiences and go back to those, and I remember like God's with me.
Wow, yeah, those are really powerful testimonies of just, yeah, when you go out in faith, God will, provide for you along the way, no matter what kind of difficulties or hardships you may face. Yeah, so I think the last few questions are just more like practical questions. So like one of them is, how do you know if you're ready to go on short-term missions? I know we have like a lot of youth and college folks here. So maybe some of them may be asking like, oh, maybe I'm too young to go. So how would you encourage those people?
Yeah, so actually my freshman year in college, my discipler asked me if I would consider summer missions. And I was like, I don't think I'm ready. Like before that, I only gone with my church to Mexico, and it was like a big group, So I don't think I'm ready to go overseas. But then what he told me was, God doesn't send those who are equipped, but he equips those he sends. And I always remember that. I think he probably got it from someone else, but I always remember that quote because it's like, okay, it's not about me or what I can do. It's all about God. And so if he's going to call me, then he'll prepare me and he'll be with me when I'm there. So there's not really any readiness you need. The only thing you need is a relationship with God, and you're willing to trust him for these like unknowns and uncertain things. You're willing to trust him and his promises and his word, then anything, like you can do anything. Nothing will stop you. I'd say practically, just in terms of age, if you're young, you probably want to get your parents' permission. And so talk it over with them. But if they're a little hesitant, another encouragement would be, mom and dad, if you're hesitant of me going, like, do you want to go together? Like, encourage your parents and you can kind of go on missions together. Who knows? Who knows what would happen? But if it's God's will that you can go, he'll make a way somehow. So yeah, I don't think anyone's too young or, you know, unequipped. God will prepare the way.
Nice. And I guess final question is like, what were some of your own initial fears of going on missions, and how did God help you overcome them?
Yeah, so the first time I went overseas to India by myself, I'd never been out of North America before. So that itself was a little scary for me. And then I was going there to meet a missionary couple that I'd never met before. So just being able to find them, I actually lost my bag. The airline lost my bags on the way there, so I had nothing. I eventually found the couple, and you know, they took me to their home. So you know, God provided there. But yeah, the other thing I was really worried about is just like losing all my comforts that I have here. Like, okay, when I go to India or I go to China or I go wherever, like I'm not going to have the things I'm used to here. But I think a big lesson that I learned is, contrary to what I thought I needed, God showed me I didn't need those things. Like I didn't need the different comforts. I don't need, you know, the people around me. I don't need, you know, to be like great at the language or to know everything there. I don't need my bed. I don't need like, you know, all the my house or the things I'm used to. All I need is God and his word. And so when I over there, I was like, wow, I don't need anything. Like God is with me, and yeah, that's all I need.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. So yeah, next we'll move on to the Q&A session. So you can type any of your questions here. You can direct message me, or you can go to that tinyurl.com/CCCF roundtable. So far, yeah, we got a question already. So one of the questions was, if missions is about bringing the gospel, then what would be the purpose of teaching English? Because I guess you mentioned that a bit.
Yeah, good question. So that was a way to be there and help people in general, and also a way to meet more people. So obviously the main purpose of going overseas was to bring the gospel, but we used English teaching as a vehicle to allow that to happen. So a lot of missionaries actually go doing other things as well, not only preaching the gospel, but also being a businessman or a teacher, or, you know, any different kinds of vocations. And so that's what we did. We taught English. We had a bunch of students. And then through that, we were able to build relationships with the local people and then eventually share the gospel. Especially if you're in a country that is closed to the gospel, such as China. Yeah, it's a pretty good strategy to go in there as like something else. You're not just going as a missionary, but you're going as a teacher or a businessman or something like that. And you're able to meet people and share through relationships.
Nice. Yeah. I guess while we wait for, oh, there's another question came right now. Nice. It says, do you have any resource recommendations for either short-term or long-term missionaries?
I wonder what they mean by resource. In like a book or a curriculum?
Yeah,
maybe
books for
both.
curriculums and training materials.
Yeah, so I think one really cool class that I would encourage anyone who's interested in missions is called Perspectives. It's put on by the U.S. Center for World Mission. And I actually took that after college, after I had already gone to 1 or 2 trips. But it's just a really good class that gives like first like the biblical foundation of missions over several weeks, and then like the historical foundation of the mission field, and then like cultural and language and strategical foundations for missions. So that's a really good class to consider. And then, yeah, a book that I like that kind of gives the big picture of what missions is for. I like the pastor John Piper, and so Let the Nations Be Glad is a good book for that.
Nice. Yeah. Let me go write those down. Okay. So far, we don't have any questions yet. So maybe you can share one of your experiences you're thinking about or advice, general advice you would give.
Okay, yeah. So another crazy story. So Nathan actually says, what is the craziest thing God did? I was in Turkey sharing the gospel. We were like going somewhere with our students on like a day trip, and on the way back we took a bus, and then I was having a really long, like a little bit argumentative, but really good argument in that way with a student next to me. And then we came to his bus stop, and then, oh, sorry guys, I have to go. And like right when we were getting into a really good part of the conversation, sharing about like who Jesus really is, he got off the bus, and I was like pretty sad that he left. And my teammates are like, oh, it's okay, like you'll have other opportunities, hopefully he comes again. And then he jumps back on the bus and he said, hey, you know what, I think I'm just gonna go with you guys because I want to finish the conversation. So he got back on the bus, and we talked the rest of the way till we got to our home. And then he's thinking a lot about it, and he wasn't ready to be a believer because in Turkey they're all Muslim, if you don't know. But then the year after, our friend and his team went again, and this guy Ali, he joined our program again, and then he became a Christian the year after, and he's still like believing and part of a church in Turkey today. So just like a really crazy story where I was like so disappointed and devastated, and it turned like 180 in a matter of seconds. So just really thankful to God for that.
Wow, praise God. No, that's really cool. That's really, yeah, you can see how God just does crazy things, and like, yeah, he's faithful to, to the souls that he wants to save. So yeah, I think we can end the Q&A from Mike here. If you have any questions you have in mind, we have a general Q&A later. So next, yeah, we're gonna have Conrad share more about his long-term missions experience. So for the first question I have for Conrad is like, yeah, can you just explain what kind of ministry work you're doing now in Mongolia?
Yeah, sure, Nathan. Good to see you guys again. I never left, but so as I said, I'm here in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar, and we do church planting, evangelism, and discipleship. So what that means is, we kind of came in to Mongolia to obviously evangelize and church plant. So obviously things have maybe evolved in the past 8 years since I've been here, but the evangelism part is pretty standard. I usually go on their university campuses, and in the beginning I didn't know any Mongolian. I've improved some, but still a long way to go. And I would just, stop a student, hi, and they'd be shocked because I look Mongolian, and they're very confused why I'm speaking English to them. And and then I'll just say, oh, I'm from America and this and that, and they're probably like too shocked to really process. And then I'll usually just go into, oh, have you ever heard about Jesus before? Have you ever been to church before, right? And usually the answer is no, never read the Bible, never been to church. I've heard of the name of Jesus, but I don't know anything. And I'm like, oh, do you want to learn the main story of the Bible? Do you want to know kind of the main idea of Christianity? And because, people are always interested to learn, especially, if you meet a foreigner overseas, they enjoy that. And so I usually get a lot of good conversations that way. So initially, that took up most of my time because I didn't know anybody. So it's like building relationships that way. And then, of course, as God has blessed, people have come to Christ. We've formed a church. We have a house church. So people actually come and on Sundays, Wednesdays, other days of the week, meet in our home for, of course, church, Bible studies, one-to-one discipleship meetings. I mean, it's just an all-purpose house church home. And yeah, and then as Mike and I were mentioning, our background has a lot of, if you know the Navigators, has a lot of kind of Navigator discipleship training. So we do a lot of one-to-one discipleship. So I realized this only later, but because I do house church and because of my kind of discipleship training background, I know every member of my church really well, and I meet them regularly. And I realized, oh, that is not normally what happens, I think, with a lot of pastors. And so I'm thankful for that and being able to really get to know people more deeply, although there's stresses with that as well. But that's kind of the day-to-day, week-to-week kind of picture. And as I said before, obviously I'm the only pastor. I lead. I'm the only praise leader as well. So I lead praise and I preach, a couple times a week, usually.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's a good overview of kind of what you have to do, and you have to kind of like do everything. Like you are just being able to start a church, but I can see how God kind of helps you through all that. Maybe someday I wasn't able to visit Mongolia because I went to Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, but maybe one day I'll see it for myself too. So the next question.
Welcome.
Yeah, I would love to. Next question is, how did God lead you to go on missions?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm really happy that Mike started off because I think our journey was very similar. My first kind of foray into missions was also to Mexico. I'm also from SoCal, Orange County area. And, we did a lot of humanitarian stuff, building houses. And I don't know if they did a good job teaching. They probably did. I just didn't listen well or understand. So I just remember I like doing outdoor work, and so I was like, oh, I get to go build a house outside. Cool. But the mentality was like, maybe some local people wanted to talk to me. But I'm like, go away. Can't you see I'm busy building a house for you? This is me as a teenager. And that was kind of my first foray. But when I was in university, kind of exact same experience, even though Mike and I were in different campus ministries at the time. Ironically, I was part of the ministry that he's a staff now in, called AACF, Asian American Christian Fellowship. And so my discipler and my kind of staff leader was asking me the same question, end of my sophomore year of college. He's like, hey, what are you doing this summer? And I was like, oh, I'm going to study abroad in China at Beijing Normal University. At that time, there's two universities, Beijing University, Beijing Normal. I'm like, so one's abnormal? I guess I'm going to the normal one. I didn't know that normal meant teacher's college. But anyway, so I was telling him, oh, I'm going to China to study abroad. And he's like, have you ever thought about missions? And I was like, kind of, but not really. But, it's not godly to say no. So I'm like, yeah, kind of. And he's like, well, I really want to challenge you to really think about it and pray about it. And I was like, okay. But as I did pray about it, God actually spoke to me and was, kind of leading me to do it. And one of the main reasons was because I had like rediscovered my Chinese roots. Because kind of like Mike growing up, I knew a little bit more Chinese than him, I think, growing up, but it was still very poor. And when I got to college at UCLA, it kind of rediscovered my roots. I'm like, why am I using a fork like a barbarian? I should use chopsticks. And, just kind of really wanting to understand Chinese culture and language and stuff. But I think God really moved my heart to really think about missions and saying, hey, do you really love the people though? And I was like, why would I love the Chinese people? There's like over 1 billion. Who cares about them? And, that was kind of God changing my heart. And I was really moved a lot. On the trip, it was to Xinjiang, which is now pretty famous. And it was during the first pandemic, the SARS pandemic. So it was a very special time in 2003. And I just remember coming back being like, whoa, this is amazing. Like God used me to like really impact people's lives, you know? And it was the same like Mike. I didn't know anything. I felt very unequipped, but it was just seeing God use me just to like be his mouthpiece. It's like, whoa, people respond to the gospel. This is amazing. And then I came back. I also read Let the Nations Be Glad. I took perspectives as well. This is all independent of Mike. I only knew him as the really tall, skinny guy who laughed too much from another campus fellowship. But I think God really used these resources to really open my eyes in the same way, to be like, wow, it's about God. It's about his glory. It's about making white hot worshipers of Jesus, you know. And I think just coming fresh off of this summer trip where I saw that, I was like, wow, God is God. Like, God really is working. This is amazing. And I want to be a part of that. So that was kind of my initial pull into it. And I continued to go on summer missions and spring trip missions down to Ensenada with my campus group, AACF. And I think we'll probably get into a little bit more. But, you know, and then after I graduated, I first went to China for 5 years. I was in Beijing. Then now 8 years here in Mongolia.
Yeah, it's so cool to see how, yeah, God like kind of put it into your heart, missions, even though maybe you weren't even thinking about it at all, and how as you kept going, he kept, yeah, impressing that into you, like, to go and just to experience him and to, yeah, be used by him. So yeah, the next question is like, yeah, how did you, you know, go from like, oh, just going on short-term missions to decide to actually do long-term missions? I always feel like that's a really big step.
Yeah, so for me, as I said, 2003 was my first kind of summer mission overseas. And as I said before, you know, I really enjoyed it. So I went back in 2004, I went back in 2005, and then I graduated at the end of 2005. And so, you know, it was just something that I really, really enjoyed. And so my future life plan changed around that. So as I told you guys, at first I was pre-med, but then after my first year at UCLA, I realized I really hate the human body. I don't hate it, but just it's really boring to study, like the, you know, physiology and stuff. But I was like, oh, I like animals and plants and stuff. So I switched to ecology, and then the new plan was I'll get a PhD and become a professor, because obviously as a Chinese kid, you have to have really high degrees. Not MD, well, PhD. My mom's like, oh, I always wanted to marry a professor, so that's okay. And so she approved of my changing majors. And then, but as I got really, you know, really touched and really wanted to be involved in missions more, I was like, how can I make more time for this? So then I was like, you know, I want to keep summers open. So then my thought was, I'm just going to be just going to be a teacher, like a high school teacher or something, so that the summers could be open. And then I went one step further my senior year, where it was like, I want even more time than that. So you know what? I'm just going to be a substitute teacher. And so I took the CBEST and this other stuff to like prepare for that. And I didn't have to study for it. And then, you know, and then I think towards the end of my senior year, what really kind of changed it to go fully into long-term missions, at least initially, was I did a study abroad in Australia. So it's called an FBQ, Field Biology Quarter, if any of you are interested in studying ecology at UCLA. So it's a required semester abroad. And so I did that in Queensland, Australia. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to do your own research, and also like produce your own academic paper, like quality paper, publish, right? So if you guys know, it's you publish or perish. And so, you know, I was like, you know, on the Great Barrier Reef, and then I was fishing with a net and counting the different species and types and numbers and putting the data, and then writing my research paper. It took, you know, the research was fun, but the data crunching and looking at the other research papers was really tedious. I probably spent like 60 hours total. And at the very end, you come up with a conclusion if you don't know. And I realized through reading so many academic papers that the conclusions are usually inconclusive. Like there's no statistical Like there's not strong enough statistical evidence to base any conclusion, to have any conclusion. And in the few cases that there is a conclusion, it's only applicable for this species of fish in this bay in this part of Australia. So I remember just thinking, I enjoy this a lot, you know. This is not something someone forced me to do, but I just started weighing it. Like, I could go down this path, which is good, or I could be going down this path, being involved in people's lives, seeing people changed, going back, because I went back again and again and again to the same place and meeting the same people. And like Mike, seeing some people believe a year or two or three later, right? Or seeing people who believed actually remain believers, because that's one of the big skepticisms. Is it real? You know? But I'd return back, I'm like, whoa, you're still a believer, you know, and you're growing, and, you know, seeing them lead people to Christ. And I was like, wow, you know, at least for me, it was like between these two choices, I feel much more fulfilled doing the second one, being involved with people. So at first it was a 2-year commitment, and then that became a +1, and then it became a plus infinity, like no time limits on it. So that was kind of my journey.
Wow, it's really cool. Even I didn't know that you were a ecologist and such. That's cool. Yeah. So next question. You shared more like how, you know, the journey to become a long-term missionary, and now next question is like, yeah, were your family and friends like kind of supportive of you going on long-term missions and, you know, changing fields and such? Because I know you come from an Asian family, and sometimes Asians are like, missionaries? They don't make money. So I don't know. That's my first reaction. But yeah.
Yeah, so I became a Christian when I was 11, around the same time as my mom. So my family, my mom's a Christian, my younger brother's a Christian. And it's pretty much the three of us out of our entire extended family on both sides. So definitely for my friends were all really supportive. A lot of my best friends also did like 1 or 2 year mission commitments after they graduated. So in Taiwan or Japan. So I felt like I'm doing things together with my friends, even though it's not in the same country. So there's a lot of support there. But I think the bigger one is from family, of course. And as I said, my mom was like, oh, you want to be a professor? That's okay. Like, you know, I always wanted to marry a professor. That's okay. But then as I started to tell her, like, oh, I'm thinking about being a high school teacher, thinking about being a substitute teacher. My mom, obviously coming from a Chinese background, you know, my mom's seeing her child's aspiration go down. She was not very happy about that, of course. And then, you know, the hardest part was when I did commit to go 2 years to China. And, you know, my mom being from Taiwan, especially, you know, growing up there, 50s, 60s, and 70s, her picture of mainland China was like stuck in that time from that kind of perspective. So she's just thinking, does Beijing have running water? And I'm like, it's the capital city. And she just, you know, and then it was just really hard for her. She was like begging me not to go. And, you know, I just remember one of the hardest things was she asked me to promise her. She's like, you know, I've never asked you to promise me anything, which is true. My mom generally is very flexible. She's not a tiger mom at all. And she's like, I want you to promise me, you know, that you won't go, you know, or that if you do go after 2 years, you'll come back, you know, and then that's it. And so I remember, like, it was so hard because I really wanted to promise my mom because she was crying and I wanted to make her feel better. But then I also knew, I don't know what God's plan is. I can't promise something that I have to break my promise to my mom later, or I have to go against God. So that was really hard. But one of the kind of blessings from this that I share with a lot of people is one of the promise verses I went out with. I actually took it from another person. I'm like, oh, that's a great verse. I'm gonna, you know, appropriate that for myself. And it's Mark 10, 29 and 30. You know, where after they talk to the rich young ruler, right? Jesus is like, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. And Peter's like, then who can be saved? And, you know, and then Jesus says, truly I tell you, no one who leaves father and mother and brothers and sisters and lands, for my sake and for the gospel, will fail to receive in this life and in the age to come 100-fold, right? Mothers and brothers and sisters and lands and persecution, And so that was one of the promises, like, God, anything I give up, you give back 100-fold. And so one of the ways I saw that was seeing my mom really change. And I was saying she was a Christian before, but I think her prayer life really increased. I think she had one subject of prayer for 2 years, but it really increased, and I think it was very genuine. And just God, through that somehow, I saw my mom actually start to like go deeper, even in her 50s and 60s. Like, wow, someone can grow even later in this, in their life, and really see answered prayer and to really engage God. And so that's a big blessing, seeing God's kind of some fruit of God's promise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that and seeing how, God is faithful to his promises as well. But yeah, the road is not easy, especially in today's Asian culture as well. But yeah, I think maybe people might have more questions about that in the Q&A. Yeah, so now for more like kind of personal experience questions. Another question I had was just like, what part of missionary work do you really enjoy most or find the most rewarding?
Yeah, I mean, I think what everyone probably would say is working with people, seeing their lives changed, and then seeing God do it. It's like I go in thinking I'm smart, educated, when I came to Mongolia, I've had like 7-8 years of full-time ministry training and 5 years abroad. I know what I'm doing. And then God showing me I don't. But just God doing it where, I'm, especially like when I'm like discouraged or I don't have faith or I'm not hoping or I'm not praying, but God does it despite of me, despite what I feel like are my failings and lack of prayer. I think that's the most rewarding, because it's really seeing, wow, lives are changed, and it's not me, it's God. And then also knowing, so then God's going to continue to see it through.
Yeah, I think it's good how you personally experience how God uses like the weak to do his work, where he can really just show that everything that he does is just because of him, right? And we can't really take any pride in ourselves. And he's like continues to be faithful even when we're faithless. So I guess next question is like, what are ways that we can help if we cannot do missions like at the moment? What are ways we can support you or support missions in general?
As Mike was saying, definitely short term is great, and I totally agree that because it's in the word missions, right? You're missional, you're focused, especially if you're going just for a few weeks or a couple months. You're like, this is what I'm here to do. But once you've been overseas a while, you're like, I just live here. Like, this is my home. And you just treat it like your home. So definitely, if you can do short term, it really is in combination with long term, it's really effective. It's really encouraging. I love hosting short termers. It reminds me, it's like, yeah, God can do things, and I need to have more faith like these young people, who don't know anything. I have no idea. One guy's like, I want to see 800 people come to Christ 2 years ago. I'm like, are you stupid? Like, what? Do you even know what you're saying? And I remember it got kind of close. It was like 600. I was just like, oh my goodness, this is insane. So yeah, definitely that's one huge way of being encouragement. I would also, as thinking about this question before, I would divide it into 2 parts. So definitely when people are first going out, probably the first few years, I don't think you guys ever write handwritten letters anymore, but I guess emails or care packages or videos, just to, especially those first few years, it's, I think, really really encouraging to be hearing from people, feeling really lonely, like people remember me, right? I think a continued thing that has always been encouraging is if people constantly asking me. I think this is also part of my Asian background. I'm not that comfortable asking, but like asking me personally, like, how are you doing financially? How are you doing financially? Just keep asking me, and then so that gives me a way to be like, oh yeah, God has been providing, I'm okay, or yeah, there's maybe some, a shortfall in my fundraising budget, and that's a huge encouragement. So if you have money, asking that is really helpful. And then also, I think, especially for those who've been in the field longer, 5, 10 plus years, I think really en- encouraging and being very happy for them to take rests. Because I think coming from a Protestant work ethic, Asian work ethic, Judeo-Christian work ethic, I don't know. Just like there's this idea of like Sabbath rest, taking time off, like is wrong. Like people in the States don't get to have a sabbatical, so why should a missionary or a pastor? So I think getting a lot of good feedback, like, no, you need rest, like it's okay. I think a lot of encouraging things like that. For me recently has been super encouraging. As I've talked to other full-time workers, there's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of like, I'm afraid people are going to judge me if I'm not like, just like, if I don't like die at the table or like, just preparing and die preaching the gospel or something. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I know, yeah, it does get lonely out there. So I encourage everyone to just continue to support any missionaries that you know. And I think, yeah, maybe during the general Q&A, we'll ask like how we can do that, contact you directly, and maybe get updates from both of you as well. Because I know Mike also does staff at WCF. And I guess the last question we have is, what are some words of encouragement for those who are hesitant to go on missions?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike covered a lot of this really well, but I'm assuming you mean long-term missions or any kind of missions?
Maybe short-term missions for now, since I think the group here, most of them have not gone to missions.
I see. So none of you are thinking like 10 years in Mongolia yet?
Oh, one person is thinking long-term. Right? So
oh, nice. Yeah, well, I mean,
share both.
So I think for most people, it'll probably be similar to me. Short term leading into medium term, leading into long term. So I would say, yeah, I mean, take the plunge. Whether it's a summer or do a gap year, be anti-Asian, and I think it's just, I think one of the things that is most impactful for most people is just seeing, wow, God is God. And there's just something about seeing God is still God, even not in my sphere of comfort, as Mike was saying. Even in Xinjiang, China, even Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, these other places, God is still sovereign and God is still working people's lives. A lot of times in spite of me, a few times because of me. And I think it's hugely eye-opening to be like, God's doing this regardless of whether you join or not. But if you join, man, this is like a huge blessing to be able to see, to be a part of God saying, this is my kingdom work. You're a part of something bigger than yourself, something spanning centuries and millennia, and it's kind of like getting your foot wet. And I feel like at the very least, as well, a lot of people say, even if you don't go again or you don't go on long term, it's a great experience, as Mike was saying, to keep, and you're able to use that, back at home. And I remember that's what I did too after my first trip. It was like, hey, I preached the gospel, people came to Christ in China. Why can't I do that here at UCLA? And so it was great trying to bring that faith back. It wasn't easy, but I tried. And I think for kind of medium to long term, because I think in the past, I mean, for your generation, I'm assuming you guys are much younger than me, most of you, but even starting Mike and my generation, the idea was this idea of you work one job forever was already changing, and I think nowadays there's no thought of I'm just going to work at Google forever. But people change jobs all the time. And especially with the rise of remote work, I would say this is a great opportunity where if you're blessed to be able to have a job that allows you to work remotely, to be kind of a tent making missionary, this is a great opportunity to go overseas for a year or two. And for a lot of people, I was reading about Gen Z. Sorry if that makes you cringe. Yesterday even, and they were just talking about how they hate the idea of I have to do like a 9 to 6, and I have to like do this or that, and I want freedom and flexibility, and this is a chance to, if that's you, to do that. Try a year, 2, 5 years overseas doing missions. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can obviously, if you're new, you probably want to partner with someone who knows, to work together and to be a support. And I feel like some of the one of the last thing, I think one of the biggest challenges that I really appreciated was well, I'll just tell you 2 things. One is I went to a missionary conference called Urbana, and they were challenging all the attendees to say, if you feel God calling, sign this pledge to go for 2 years after you graduate, right when you graduate. And one of the reasons why is because, once you start working, you're going to buy like a DSLR camera, you're going to get a car, you're going to get a home mortgage, you're going to get a girlfriend, a boyfriend, right? And then it's very hard to up and leave. You have student loans, you have a mortgage, you have all this stuff. It's much harder to leave at that point. Much easier to, I'm single, free, nothing, hopefully not too much student debt, right? And I'm gonna go, and then you can always come back and get a job and get married later. But it's hard to do the reverse. So that's one encouragement. Second is, for me, one of the words of Dawson Trotman, he's the founder of the Navigators, that really touched me, was his kind of motto was never do anything that other Christians can't or won't do, right? When there's so much that, God has allowed me to do. I butchered it. But basically the idea is, this sounds way better. I forgot how it went. But basically, right, there's a lot of things that a lot of Christians can do and are doing. But there's also a lot of stuff that, for different reasons, a lot of Christians either can't or won't, right? But my situation allowed me. I didn't have student debt. I'm healthy. I speak English, and allowed me to do missions work, and especially more frontier missions work. And I think that was really satisfying to see, like, I could do a lot of different things because people are always like, hey, stay in America. There's a lot of need in America. I'm like, there is a lot of need. But when I weigh the needs, it's like there's more need, in frontier work. And I think that was one of Nathan's questions I didn't ask, but I wanted to answer was, one of the things that really, he did ask, that was really fulfilling is that so many people have never heard the gospel, have never gone to church, right? I've never had like a close Christian friend, and then I get to be that person for them. So that's kind of my encouragement.
Nice. Thanks, Conrad, for that, for those words of encouragement. And yeah, I would also like to encourage everyone to start thinking about missions, especially when you're young, when you do have a free summer. So once you start work, they don't give you much time off. Yeah. So now we're going to the direct Q&A session. So if you have any specific questions for Conrad, please, write it in the messages or write it on that Google Doc I sent. So one question someone had was, how has COVID affected your mission planning or field, either logistically or spiritually, etc.?
Good question. I mean, obviously COVID's affected everyone around the world. For us, I don't know so much for mission planning, but it has really affected our ability to evangelize, of course. Campuses are closed. People don't want to talk to you. Even now, like, because the new policy in Mongolia is let everyone get infected. So there's like no restrictions anymore. I think I've gotten COVID at least twice. Um, but because, I didn't think this was abnormal, but I found out through the pandemic this past year that Mongolia has been kind of locked down and then opened up. We might have been the only church or one of the very few churches that were open for in person. We pretty much never closed except for one short break where the government was really, really strict for about a few weeks. But we've always been open, and so kind of in God's sovereign irony, I don't know how to say it, but I remember we were looking for a new missions organization recently to join. And as we were talking to this couple in another organization, they ended up joining our church. We didn't join their organization. They joined our church because like you're the only ones open. And then recently we've been getting other like some Russian Christian and other Christians. So even though we haven't had our normal source of kind of new contacts through evangelism, especially on campus, but God's been bringing new people in very funny ways.
Nice. That's good to hear. Sorry to hear you had COVID twice. We'll continue praying for you and your family. I guess one question someone else had was, what were some cultural differences that you experienced when going to Mongolia? I'm sure it's pretty different than America.
Yeah, so one of the stories that even the Mongolians love me telling to other Mongolians now is that when I came to Mongolia, my first time, it was like 2009, didn't know anything. It was just a short-term winter trip. And I got there and I remember someone asking me, do you want to drink some milk tea? And if you know me, I'm a huge boba fan. So I'm like, milk tea? Whoa, you have boba in Mongolia? This is great. Yeah, sure. And, so I got a cup and then I'm like, this doesn't look like boba. And then I tasted it. I'm like, this is disgusting. This is like salty milk tea. What is this? And it had like oil and fat floating on top. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it was just like huge culture shock. Like, this is not boba. And the church loves me telling this story because from their perspective, they're like, who would put sugar and balls in milk tea, in like tea, milk tea? Obviously you put salt in it and butter and oil or fat. So that was one very funny culture shock. Another one is that I think a lot of people who go overseas know is their like time difference, or specifically their lack of any kind of sense of time. Like if you do stuff in other parts of Asia, not Japan obviously, or like Africa, you'll run into that. And so especially in the beginning, it was really frustrating. Like I'd meet a guy, I'd share the gospel with him. I'm like, hey, do you want to meet up again? He's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay, how about we meet here tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Is that okay? And he's like, yeah. So I'll be waiting there at 1 o'clock the next day and he's not there. I'll message him, doesn't answer me. I'd call him, his phone is off. And I'm like, wait, 30 minutes, 1 hour. And I'm like, I guess this guy's not showing up. And then I'd randomly bump into him, I don't know, a few days later on campus and be like, oh, hey, how are you? And he's, I'm expecting some kind of Asian shame, like, oh, sorry, like, I totally forgot. Like in China, this would happen a lot. People would lie to me and make some excuse. But the guy would just be like, hey, what's up? How are you? Good to see you. And I'd be like, oh, do you want to like meet? He's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, tomorrow here, 1 o'clock? Oh, yeah, sure. And I'm just like, wait, what? And then the same thing. I'd wait for him. He's not there. Bump into him a few days later. No shame. I'm like, at least lie to me. At least in China, they would lie to me. I have the good sense to lie to me. Anyways, but it's just very like, it's a strength and weakness, of course. And so I'm only focusing on the weakness, but there's strengths to that too. But that was a big culture shock.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Oh, that's really interesting. I think knowing some of my friends, maybe they should be in Mongolia based on their perception of time.
Yeah, perception of time is bad. Come here. We'll fit right in.
Yeah. Another question. This person didn't know how to word it, but it's like, since we know you're married like with a long term, I guess it's more like, did you have like, were you thinking of like a spouse who would like go long term with you, or I don't know, yeah, having a spouse with the same missional heart, was that something that you had to like intentionally look for, or I don't know, what's the story behind that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Time to kiss me.
Okay. I'm almost done.
Have to get the
This is my son, sorry. Okay. You can say hi really quick. This is my son, Lucas.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Let me finish, okay? So, yeah, I mean, for me, because my heart was so kind of strong into missions, I will tell you, this is why the girlfriend I had senior year of college didn't work. But anyways, so because she didn't necessarily, or wasn't sure at the time she had the same heart. But that was something I was really concerned about. Was I always told people I want a missionary wife, not a missionary's wife, meaning I wanted one to work together with me, alongside of me. And especially because I was like, I want her to be called too. Otherwise, when things get hard, and they will get hard, she's going to blame me. Like, you brought me here and suffering. And I was like, no. Blame God. Take it up with God. It's not me. And, that's a joke. But, really wanted one to do it together as a team. And so, just long story short, my wife is from Australia. So she's Hong Kongese Australian. We met in Beijing when I was doing a house church there, and we got married in 2014, and we live here now. And yeah, I remember when I came back for extended stateside service, I told all my friends, I was 29 at the time, and I was like, all right, guys, my leader, my discipler said some people can be single for life like himself, but you can't. And he told me I need a wife, so find me a wife. So, because they all went to big churches, so I'm like, go find me a wife or find me a girlfriend. My only requirement is that she has 1 year of missions experience anywhere around the world, so that at least, because there's a difference between thinking you like it and then trying it and still wanting to do it, right? So it's like, I thought this was like super low standards, like could be anything, any age, anything, just 1 year. And then they all came back like, oh, Conrad, your standards are too high. Like, couldn't find any. I'm like, you guys go to like churches of like 500 to 1,000. Like, come on. And so I realized that that's pretty rare. And then my wife was also serving with our group here in Mongolia at that time. So God led me to start to think about her, and obviously it worked out.
Well, that's really cool. And you did research in Australia too, so I guess you both were in Australia. I don't know if at the same time, but
I mean, we're in Australia at the same time, but not the same city. She also said if I had not studied abroad in Australia, she wouldn't have married me, because like there wasn't enough in common. So I guess in God's sovereignty, studying abroad helped. Talk about wombats and
using that ecology. You never know. Nice, cool. Thanks, Conrad. I think it's 9:23. Let's move on to like the general Q&A session. So I think one of the biggest questions for you and Mike is, how can we be praying to support either of you? So I guess, Mike, do you want to share first, like how we can be praying for you and how we can support you?
Yeah, thank you. So on campus, we, usually people who come are already from a Christian background, but actually this year, so school only started 1 month ago, and there is about 4 or 5 non-Christians who have been coming out to AACF. So I'm in the middle right now of trying to coordinate a new small group Bible study for them. And at the same time, there's no students who are trained to lead it. So I'll be training 2 or 3 AACF students to help them learn how to like lead that kind of Bible discussion with non-believers. So it's really cool. that they're interested to, read the word together, and also for the AACF students to have this experience to share the word with non-believers. So that's the really big thing happening right now. I'm just praying that everything can come together and we'll be able to find a good time to meet on campus, and that our non-Christian friends who come can encounter Jesus and eventually believe.
Oh, for sure.
And then one other thing is I'm taking out students to do cold contact evangelism. So hoping that they will gain a heart for the lost, and through that be equipped to share the gospel.
Oh yeah, definitely need lots of prayers, but it's exciting to see what God's doing. You've been doing this, time of COVID and such. Do you mind like putting your email in the chat? Maybe some of us may be interested in reaching out to you, or is there some way we can like sign up for your support letter?
Yeah, let me go ahead and put it in the chat.
Cool. Yeah, so if you're interested in, I guess, asking for a support letter, you can just contact him directly. And Conrad too, if you want to put your email too, so just in case people are interested in contacting you, asking for your support letter as well. So I guess Conrad, how can we pray for you?
Yeah. So thanks for asking that. So I think one of the main things right now is we're transitioning from our previous organization to a new organization. So I've been a part of that group for 16, 17 years. So it's a pretty major change, and just please pray. I think for myself, just that I can continue to trust God in this kind of transition period, and also there's some healing that I'm kind of going through, my wife and I. So if you can pray for that too, just continue to receive comfort, healing from God. We're also planning, my wife and I, to potentially have our first sabbatical sometime next year. And so there's a lot of planning and different things and praying about that as well. So if you could pray for that. Ministry-wise, I think two things to pray for. One is, I think our church is God is really wanting our church to learn like forgiveness and reconciliation in this season, as well as just kind of understanding His grace, that we talk about, the gospel of grace, God's kindness and goodness. And so pray that my wife and I can learn that first, and then also that would kind of seep into our church culture. And the last one is just for more men, just needing more Mongolian men to rise up to really bless their families in the country.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. We'll definitely be praying for you. I guess, one question that I had was, I think, what are some of like the major things we can pray for like Mongolia in general? Like, I think each country, based on the culture, have different needs or like different brokenness, healing that they need. Like, specifically for Mongolia, what kind of needs do you feel like that country needs?
Yeah, I mean, kind of in broad strokes, because Mongolia doesn't have, like, for example, a Muslim background or some kind of that kind of stronghold. They're animistic, shamanistic. So generally the gospel has been able to penetrate much easier historically in those kind of situations. So something that is really cool is that a lot of Mongolians are open to hearing the gospel. A lot are actually very open to believe as well. But it's usually the follow-up that is a lot harder. And so, I mean, I was reading a paper by a Korean missionary PhD. I'm not really sure how to do this yet, so if you could pray. But it's like Christianity has, we as Christians have learned how to adapt Christianity into the city. And so it does really well in city contexts. But in the nomadic context, where like people are always moving, you can't find them, you would need kind of like a Methodist on horseback kind of like literal on horseback itinerant pastor, kind of method, to kind of reach the countryside. Is that we, even till now, I think, still don't really know how to do that. So the gospel has penetrated into the city. Basically, Mongolia has one city, the capital city. It has half the population, 1.5 million. But in the countryside, it's still very difficult because you can't find them, you don't know where they are, and usually pastors want to get some kind of theological training, so they come to the city. But if you come to the city with your wife and kids, where there's running water, there's heating, you get to live in an apartment, no one wants to go out into -40, -50-degree winters, which is what happens. Live in a yurt, a ger, with no running water, no heating after that. So there's a huge dearth of pastors for the countryside. I have a heart for that. My wife doesn't, so I don't think we'll be doing that. But I think that's something very specific to Mongolia that still has a very strong nomadic background. And another one is because of the animistic, shamanistic background. I think there's a lot of spiritual warfare generally, but if you're like me, growing up in the States, like you think all this stuff is just mumbo jumbo and unscientific, but that is a reality that the Bible speaks of, and I think it's just a lot more apparent here in Mongolia, and so I think there's a lot of demonic influence. Just as an example, is we've had plenty of people who have stopped coming to church because they said they visited a shaman. The shaman had a vision saying, you need to be a shaman. And the way they do that, because no one wants to be a shaman, but the way they do that is by cursing them. And in America, you wouldn't care. Someone curses you, you're like, whatever. But they're like, your family's going to die. You're going to get injured and hurt. Like people around you are going to get into car accidents unless you do this. And everyone I've heard has been coerced into doing that because I don't know it, some of it is like the confirmation bias, but some of it I think maybe is the curse taking effect. And yeah, people seeing stuff happening around them, and then they become a shaman and they go into this kind of evil spirit thing. Yeah, so please pray for that.
Thanks, Conrad. For this, telling us more about Mongolia. I'm sure a lot of us maybe don't know much except for Genghis Khan. So now we have more details, especially in the spiritual needs. That seems to be the last of the questions, and I know it's 9:32. So I just want to thank both of you again for just making the time to just share about missions and your personal experience. I know I learned a lot. So if anyone has any more questions they would like to personally ask them, the email is in the chat. So you can email them anytime. And I just want to encourage everyone to, just have this missional mindset and the same heart that God has. And I think our church is looking to start missions again. We haven't done missions for a while. And I think it's been a bit difficult with COVID, but I think we're praying and just trying to get people excited for it. So maybe, we have missionaries our church is connected to in Belize, in Cambodia. And now I think also maybe we can possibly go to Mongolia too, wherever it's open. For us to go. So definitely continue to pray for that, and definitely pray for both Mike and Conrad as well. Cool. So thanks everyone, and let me close us in prayer. Dear Lord, just want to thank you for this time where we can just get to worship you, get to know you more, just see how faithful you are and how your heart is for the nations. That, Lord, that you don't want to just only bless us individually, but you want every nation to worship and give glory to you. So Lord, just really want to pray for both Brother Conrad and Brother Mike in their own ministries as well. Mike doing campus ministry, doing small groups, evangelism, reaching out to non-Christians at UCI, and also Conrad just doing missions work in Mongolia and seeing the big need there to spread the gospel. So Lord, I just pray that you just continue to be with them, strengthen them, and just continue to show your power even in their weakness. So Lord, we just bless the rest of the night. I pray that the things that were said today just impress our hearts and just I pray that all of us have this heart to just want to see you more and want to be used by you. So we just pray all this in your son Jesus' name. Amen. Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, so free to stay here and chat if you want to chat. I'm not sure Conrad and Mike's time, want to respect them. So yeah, both of you are free to leave. But so yeah, that concludes the end of our Friday fellowship.